Good morning, everybody. It is Man Coverage, July 31st, 2022, the last day in the month of July. Wow, it's football time, brother. Things are getting going. This is Knoxville Nate and James Bonneville. We're going to talk college football with you again today. We're going to break it down like we always do. James, we got college football right around the corner. How are you feeling about that?
Hey, camps are starting. Things are getting more exciting. It's going to be fun. I mean, heck, think about it this way. Friday, August 26th, we're going to start it off in Las Cruces with that famed Nevada Wolfpack against Jerry Kill's New Mexico State Aggies. I'm looking forward to it. It can't get here quick enough.
You know what, buddy? I am ready to, put the pads on and start getting some hitting going. We've broken down pretty much everything you can possibly break down in college football. And it's time to start breaking down games, I think. I'm ready to, talk about the games from the weekend. That sounds pretty awesome to me instead of just giving our predictions. But we've got a few more weeks to discuss. We're going to break down the SEC today. We're going to break down the top defenses for Fantasy 2022 college football. We're also going to welcome special guest Mr. John Wilkerson to the show. John has been covering the Volunteers and the SEC football for 29 years. He's been one of the mainstay voices on the sports animal here locally in Knoxville, Tennessee. He's also been a part of the Vol Network since 1987, I believe. So this guy knows his stuff. He's also the voice of the Vols college baseball team. So great guest. Looking forward to having him on the show. Johnny Serino, what's up, brother? We're excited. Yeah, John's going to join us in about 28 minutes. So get ready for that, Johnny. He is the man. Johnny Wilkerson knows it all. He does a great job covering the SEC, covering college football, and also, as I mentioned, being the voice of the Baseballs, who went to the College World Series last year, got beat out by the Notre Dame Fighting Irish right down at the end of the Super Regional this year. But John did a fabulous job. So we're going to have him on. We're going to get his thoughts on the SEC today, and we're going to give our own thoughts on the SEC. We're going to tell you who's going to be at top, who's going to be at the bottom. While we're talking SEC, why don't we discuss what went down this week and get everybody up to speed on what has happened since we last talked to you last Sunday. There's been some players that have committed. There's been some guys that have decided where they're going to go play. Sometimes commitments flip the switch, but so far they have announced where they're heading. And one of the biggest ones this week was running back Richard Young, who was the number one rated running back in the 2023 class. No surprise, he committed to Alabama, the number 14 overall player in the 2023 class. He went to Lehigh Senior High School in Lehigh Acres, Florida. 5'11", 195, ran for 1,800 yards and 19 touchdowns last year as a junior. This kid looks pretty special on tape, and it's going to be probably the next big-time running back in Alabama school history. What do you think about Alabama's week, James? They also grabbed Caleb Downs, the 5-star safety who was on everybody's list, and then they also swiped a offensive tackle. Not sure if I'm pronouncing this name right, but Olas Alainen, the 4-star prospect, 6'6", 315 from Windsor, Connecticut, a guy that was really, really high on Ohio State's list. So was Caleb Downs, and they both went to Bama. What did you think when you saw Nick Saban racking it up this week, James?
This is Nick Saban's time. This is when he starts to shine recruiting wise. He always starts off a little slow, and it keeps building and building and building as you keep going throughout the process. And then you wait for that U.S. Army game where he usually pulls off 2-3 shockers right there as well. And then it's going to sit back and have some spots available for the transfer portal where look at this year's class. I mean, you bring in guys like Jamar Gibbs, Eli Ricks, and Tyler Steen out of Vanderbilt. I mean, that was just a bang up class.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, how he keeps getting all these guys, I don't know. And every year, I want to ask John Wilkerson about this later. I really want to try and put what Nick Saban has done down in Alabama in perspective. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen in my
Yeah,
entire life. I've been watching college football for almost 40 years. Don't tell anybody that I'm 40 years old. That's freaky to even say. But I've literally been watching college football for over 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. I know there's the legend of Newt Rockne and Paul Bear Bryant and all the names throughout the history of college football, but there's never been anything like this, in my opinion, especially in the modern era of college football, which is so competitive, and yet he continues to dominate. And
yeah,
that's one of the things that I want to ask John about too is, the SEC, don't get me wrong, great football conference, probably the best football conference overall. But I mean, let's be honest, the SEC gets a little extra shine because they have the best team every year. Am I crazy thinking that Bama gives the SEC a little boost because they're the best
agreed.
dynasty you've ever seen?
Agreed. Honestly, I could go. I mean, if you want to go back and talk about dynasties, I think you could make a realistic argument for that USC team that Pete Carroll was there for. But, was he there long enough? I mean, that's the one thing you got to look at Nick Saban is just his longevity. I mean, it's not like he's done it at one place. People forget that, what he did at LSU and prior to that, what he did at Michigan State. I mean, those Michigan State teams were unreal. I mean, go back and look through that roster. I mean, the receiving core was crazy from Plax Burris to Charlie Rogers at tailback. You had guys like TJ Duckett, Jeff Smoker at quarterback. They were just stacked. And that is complete testament to the recruiting efforts of Nick Saban and what he's built there.
Any college football show with a Jeff Smoker reference is off the charts. I mean, come on, man. Jeff Smoker? Are you kidding me?
Jeff Smoker was a heck of a quarterback, man.
He was really good.
He was really good. He peeled off after, like, his senior year was a downside, but you look at his early part of his career, especially during the Saban era. I mean, when Bobby Williams got there, it kind of went off the rails a little bit, but man, he was a quality quarterback.
No doubt. And he's done it everywhere he's ever been. He's won across the board. And to be honest, he gets a little bit of a bad rap for what happened for the Dolphins. But you know what? You give Nick Saban 2 or 3 more years in Miami, I think he turns that place around too.
Well, I keep going back to Bill Parcells on that one. You had two alphas in the room, and you had Bill Parcells, buying the groceries and then making Nick Saban bake the cake. Yeah. Nick Saban's one of those guys that likes to buy his own groceries. And I think you can see the success he's had at the collegiate level. I mean, you look back throughout all of his career and everybody talks about his specialty players. Where he's won is on the line of scrimmage. And I mean, you look at guys like, J.C. Latham, their right tackle this year. I'm telling you, he's just that next star on that offensive line.
Yeah, that's when, I saw that this offensive lineman that we just mentioned, Olas Alainen, chose Alabama. I'm like, I don't really blame the guy. They've been pumping offensive linemen into the league.
Exactly.
The Buckeyes have not done that. The Buckeyes haven't really had a successful offensive tackle in the NFL since Taylor Decker, who plays for the Detroit Lions now. And, he's had a solid career. But other than that, a lot of the tackles have not really shined in the NFL. Now, we've had some guards. We've had some, our center, Corey Linsley, was rated the #1 center in the league. Knox, I believe, was in the Pro Bowl for the as a guard. So we've had some interior linemen come from the Buckeyes, but the offensive tackles have not really shined. Now, they've got 2 studs this year, Paris Johnson Jr. and DeJuan Jones. Both, I think, will be first or second round picks coming up in 2023 or 2024. But I can't really blame this guy. I mean, just think of the names, going back to Andre Smith and going back to the guy for Willis, the guy for the Browns who starts at left tackle. I mean, the kid from last year, Neal, who went to the New York Giants. I mean, there seems like there's an offensive tackle every year. Leatherwood, who went to the Raiders. It's just whoever plays offensive tackle for the Alabama Crimson Tide gets drafted in the first round. I mean, it's kind of how it works. So can't really blame that kid. And then the Buckeyes did pick up a quarterback this week. Looks like they landed a commitment from Brock Glenn, who is a 4-star quarterback. Had offers from 21 big-time Power 5 schools. He's the number 17 quarterback in the 2023 class from right here in Tennessee. First quarterback from the state of Tennessee to ever commit to Ohio State University. Kind of crazy, but good for him, man. I hope he goes up there and competes and makes that room better. Now it's kind of a crowded room. It's already got Kyle McCord and C.J. Stroud and the Devin Brown from last year, who was a top 100 player as well. So good luck on getting on the field. But if he wants to learn how to play quarterback, learning from Ryan Day is not a bad idea.
No, not at all. I mean, it's kind of confusing, but he wants to go there. He wants to go there. We can't stop him. So it helps Ohio State out from a depth perspective. So
it certainly does. And these kids should go wherever the hell they want to go. I mean, that's how it was. I think back, to when I was looking at schools and trying to decide where I wanted to go. I really had the opportunity to look around and choose the school that I wanted to go to. I got to make some visits, pick it out. Now, I wasn't going to a Power 5 D1 level playing Division III ball, but I really think back, and I hope these kids really choose which school they like the most and get to pick the school that works best for them, because that's the way to truly be happy. And let's dive in real quick to our defenses for college football. This is our last installment of the fantasy. We've been breaking it down for several weeks, giving everybody all the best ideas prior to their draft. Drafts are probably coming up here in the next week or two for everybody under the sun. And we've got some defenses ready to go for you. I want to start it off with the top 3 on your list, James. You've got Alabama 1, you've got Georgia 2, and you've got Clemson 3. Talk to me a little bit about, and we're going to get into the SEC obviously in depth today, but give me your reasoning behind putting Bama ahead of Georgia. Did they just lose too much off last year's team, or what do you think?
Very much so. Well, I mean, you bring back the best defensive player in the country in Will Anderson. I mean, quite frankly, you could make an argument for him for the Heisman Trophy overall, but I mean, the way he attacks the edge, I don't think you've seen somebody attack the edge like this at Alabama since Derek Thomas. He just has that kind of he just comes off the page that quickly. And then you follow that up with what they got at their defensive backfield, doing a phenomenal job bringing Eli Ricks, the transfer from LSU. And on the other side of him, you got Kool-Aid McKistry. Both sophomores, both are going to be incredibly good, and I think they could get a lot of picks. Plus, you bring back 2 safeties in Jordan Battle and DeMarco Helms, both juniors. I mean, this is a solid defense. And then plus, you bring back Tua and Dallas Turner at linebacker. This is just a solid team. They don't lose much from last year's roster. I think it's an easy number 1 because you look from front to back. They didn't lose that much, and their schedule is not that difficult overall. I mean, I think their hardest games are going to be on the road on October 15th at Tennessee and then October 12th at Mississippi. But the rest of their games, I mean, they got A&M at home on October 8th, which that's going to be a big game. But I'm going to, how do you bet against Alabama at home?
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling that they're going to be just fine going up against Jimbo and Texas A&M this year. I mean, they've got a little score to settle with them from last year. And, I think they're going to be perfectly ready for that ball game. There's been a lot of back and forth between old Jimbo and St. Nick in the offseason, and I think St. Nicholas is going to have his team ready to rock going up against the Aggies this year. And my big thing that I want to talk about with Bama defense is Turner. That's a guy who really turned it on, in my opinion, at the end of the year last year. That guy was all over the damn place in the national championship game and also in the college football playoff semifinal game. I think he really, really turned it up and started to figure out where his strengths are, and started to really have the confidence to go after it. And hell, if you put somebody across the line from Will Anderson Jr. that can do damage like that, and maybe really start wrecking the offense for somebody else, when you've got somebody that the protection has to be pointed to in Will Anderson Jr. I'm with you. He's the number one player in college football, in my opinion, especially from the defensive side. He may be the number one player overall, in my opinion. If I had the number one pick in the draft next year, that's who I would take. And to have Turner on the opposite side of him, who is a formidable pass rusher, I think that just makes Bama the number one defense, in my opinion. Also, adding Ricks to the mix, that to me was a huge get for them. I couldn't believe that he leaves LSU and immediately signs with Bama. I mean, the rich get richer, man. It seems like to me over and over again. Saban has used the portal to his advantage. I think some of these other coaches are going to have to take notice. Go out and get one or two guys where you have a hole, like last year where they had a hole at wide receiver and they got Jameson Williams. I think they did the exact same thing. He saw that national championship game, was like, man, we're a little weak at corner. And he went out and got one of the top corners in college football from LSU. So I'm with you. I think Bama's defense is back.
One thing you got to talk about too as well is their offense is significantly better too. And I think field position game, I think they can have a lot of fun with some teams in pinning them deep and make them play field position and have to do a 15-play drive to score a touchdown, which we all know is going to be pretty tough, which this is the whole reason why I put them over my number 2 and 3 teams in Georgia and Clemson, is they had so much loss to their offense that I think you're going to have a problem. I mean, Georgia lived on field position last year where people had to gamble because they relied so much on that front seven. Well, you lost 6 of that front 7. The only guy you got coming back is Nolan Smith. Now, don't get me wrong. Jalen Carter's a heck of a freaking athlete too as well, and they've got depth across the board. Plus, you look at their defensive backfield, you bring back Keely Ringo, who had that phenomenal touchdown, and also Christopher Smith at safety. But they lost 8 of 11. And now you're going to rely more on that offense and Stetson Bennett. I mean, your receiving core is depleted. Jermaine Burton transferred. Jermaine Burton, is there from Alabama, but there isn't that much depth, which means you got to rely more on that running game and those tight ends. And Georgia likes to live between the hash marks. They don't like to go downfield. So that's why I'm putting them behind behind Alabama, because I think they're not going to get nearly as good a field position as they did last year. But it's still a very high quality defense. I would put them number 2. I just don't think you're going to get near the production you would out of Alabama.
Yeah, and we talked about Clemson on the last show. We think that they're going to be able to overcome losing Venables, who's been a great defensive coordinator for a long time, but they've got so much talent on that defensive line. You think about Breeze, you think about Miles Murphy. Those are 2 of the best defensive linemen in college football, in my opinion. I think their defense survives losing their coordinator.
Xavier Thomas on the other side. I mean, plus you look at their linebacking core. You bring back Trenton Simpson, but then you have Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter playing the other 2 linebacker spots. I mean, this is a good quality front 7. You're not going to run on them very well. Where I think they got to get a little bit better on is their back end, because they're a little youthful back there. But you look at their schedule. I mean, hardest games to play at Wake. Wake's not a very tough place to play. They're a good offense. They're a good team, but it's not a real lively environment. Up in Chestnut Hill at BC, at Florida State. But the big game at Notre Dame, November 5th. That's going to be the telltale. But you look at that schedule from a defensive standpoint, I mean, you can make a logical argument to put them ahead of Georgia. I just like Georgia's offense better than I like Clemson's, because until they can show me different after what I saw last year, I got to put them in this 3 spot.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good spot for them. I like this defense quite a bit, and they play, as you mentioned, in the ACC, so that helps them too. The ACC, in my opinion, is pretty weak this year. I mean, Wake Forest is a decent team. NC State has gotten better, but the rest of these teams don't scare me at all. besides Clemson, and I think they're going to have a pretty easy walk to the championship if they can just win out and get it done, which I think they will do this year. I think they're going to be better on offense. I've got some faith in DJU. I saw it from him the year before. If they can protect him and give him a little bit of time back there to throw the football and the receivers can get open, I think they'll be just fine. Talk to us. We're going to jump up to the Big Ten as you've got Wisconsin and Iowa as your next top-rated defenses. Talk to me a little bit about those two teams and what you like about their defenses overall.
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to look at what Wisconsin's defense has done since Jim Leonard's been there. He has done an incredible job at the 3-4, and his zone package blitzes are phenomenal. Honestly, it's one of those teams where as soon as the ball gets placed, you either snap it right then, or you have to wait till after the 10-second mark to see how they shift on what you do. Now, their linebackers, they did lose Chanel, they did lose Sanborn, but they still got another great linebacker, the California product out of Nick Herbig. He is going to be a stud at that position, plus their front three, Keanu Benton and Isaiah Mullins. Benton playing nose tackle and Mullins at the DN position. What they do is like to lock up that offensive line to allow space for those linebackers to come through. It's a quality, once again, another quality Wisconsin defense to work off of.
Yeah, and let's be honest, man, Iowa was really led by that defense last year. I mean,
completely.
Kurt Ferentz knows what the hell he's doing, putting defenses together, and that defense got them all the way to the Big Ten championship game. With them, it's just a matter of, can they score any points? Can the quarterback throw the ball more than 10 yards? Those are good questions because I don't know, but their defense has always been pretty solid, and I expect them to be solid again this year as they've got some dudes coming back.
The strength of that team has always been their linebackers. When they've had strong linebacker play and they can keep the edge, they're a tough team to beat because their defensive line is their main strategy is to lock you up, to create holes for the linebackers to work in space. And they have a phenomenal linebacker in Jack Campbell. The guy's a freaking pterodactyl. He's on the butt kiss list already. 6'5", 243. If you watched any game last year, you saw Jack Campbell play because he's everywhere. This is a guy who will probably be a late first, early second round draft pick next year. I'm kind of shocked he didn't come out last year, but phenomenal talent. But then you tag team him with Seth Benson Jr. out of South Dakota, as well as Justin Jacobs. All three of them are on the butt kiss list. And then you bring that back with three of their four starting defensive linemen coming back, Logan Lee, Noah Shannon, and John Wagoneer. I think if there's one thing that this defense needs is that edge guy. I think Wagoneer can be that guy. They lost a little bit from some graduations from guys getting to the quarterback. But then you still got Riley Moss, who I swear is on his 20th year of eligibility in Iowa City. So
they always have these guys that seem like they've been on the Hawkeyes for like 10 years plus.
Oh, completely.
Dallas Clark was one that comes to mind, a guy who walked on and played linebacker and then got moved to tight end, and it just seemed like he was there for 10 years. So they always seem to have those guys. But really impressed me on the defensive side. I mean, if you look back at that Big Ten championship game where, the Wolverines worked them a little bit, the defense wasn't the problem in that game.
No,
I mean,
the offense was the problem. I mean, think about it this way. As bad as that offense was last year, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, how bad a field position they got put in time and time and time again. And the defense bailed them out constantly. If Petrus can do anything, I think Iowa's got a legit chance of winning the Big Ten West. And I mean, if their offense moving the ball even a little bit, they could play with Ohio State. I mean, because that defense is legit. You're going to have a hard time running on them.
Yeah, I don't know if I can go that far, but
I mean, I'm not going to say I'd pick them to beat them, but I mean, that would be an upset. That's very possible. I mean, heck, look at what Iowa's done against Ohio State in the past.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing that I failed to mention at the start of our show here was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish finally got a quarterback, but it's not for 2023. They got Noah Tam out of White Lake, Michigan, committed for 2034.
So yeah, look at that one on Twitter. Pretty funny. They still have not, they've been recruiting like gangbusters. They just can't seem to sign a quarterback, and that's going to be their issue this year. Now you've got their defense ranked pretty high. Can their defense carry this team? And what do you think about them being able to, get you points on a fantasy level? Can this defense, get turnovers? Can they get pick sixes? Can they pick up fumbles and run with them? What can this defense do from a fantasy point status?
The back seven is they're going to be their strength this year, which is weird because usually it's always their front seven. I mean, their front seven, they lose 3 of their 4 starting defensive linemen. I think they can come back, or excuse me, 2 of 4. You bring in Howard Cross this year to play nose guard and Riley Mills to play D end, but they only lose 1 guy in their back seven. There's a lot of depth coming back to this team. And you look at their schedule, it really lends itself outside of at Ohio State. There's a lot to be really like about this schedule going all the way down the line because they're playing against teams that they could really muscle up front and have some fun. There's nobody really that scares the crap out of me in this game. Maybe USC at the end, but I don't know how to judge USC until I see them on paper because all we're seeing is names.
Yeah,
so,
no, there's no doubt. I'm really confused about what to think about USC so far. I mean, I think their best thing going for them is that they're in the Pac-12, but we'll see what happens with them. Talking about a couple other teams you've got here before we move on and get into the SEC breakdown. After Notre Dame, you've got Texas A&M. Texas A&M lost their entire defensive line. That is the one thing that concerns me a little bit about that. I know they're stacked recruiting-wise, and I know they've got guys to come in, but losing their entire defensive line to the draft has to affect them a little bit on defense, right?
It does, but you look at the back seven, they bring 5 of 7 back, including all their defensive backs. I mean, I'm really relying, that's why they have them a little bit farther down, but I'm really relying a lot on those, their last 2 recruiting classes to come up. I mean, they're going to start, it looks like right now, they're going to start a redshirt freshman, a true freshman, a sophomore on their defensive line. Nolan Smith or Walter Nolan is pegged in right now to play that. Somebody we've covered on this show during our recruiting analyst. He's going to come in and start right away for that Aggie defense.
Yeah, no, I got to see that guy up close and personal here in town as he led the Pal Panthers to a state championship in his lone season here in Knoxville. And that kid was legit, man. I wasn't sure what to expect. Sometimes those guys that are 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds, they can dominate in high school just because of their size. And sometimes they lack a motor. Sometimes they lack drive. Not so with this kid, man. I saw him. He's pretty much after it on every single play. They were playing him at running back and handing him the football at times, and he was taking it into the end zone. And I saw him scoop and score. He caused a fumble, knocked a ball out of the quarterback's hand, picked it up, took it for a touchdown. This kid's the real deal. And if I was losing my starting 4 and had him coming in behind him, I'd feel pretty confident that we're going to be okay. So I think, they've got some serious talent there at Texas A&M. There's no doubt. The last couple of years recruiting has been craziness. I hate to talk about this team, but they're on your list, so I guess we better. The team up north is next on there. Now, they lose their defensive coordinator. They lose Ajabo. They lose Hutchinson. You still think their defense is going to be solid?
Dax Hill, too, as well. You can't forget that. But
yeah, he's going to the Bengals.
I mean, it's still – you look at this defense time and time again, it's been consistent overall. Now, are you going to get the points per sack that you did last year with Hutchinson and Ojabo being gone? Probably not. But they are still going to be very stellar. I wouldn't put them in the top 5 category. I think if you're going to go after somebody defensively, get those points, I think you got to look Alabama to Iowa. But if you start getting down there where you waited too long, I would be looking at Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Michigan to be on that list.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think, it's going to be interesting to see what Jimbo does up there this year, losing both coordinators, trying to run to the NFL and unsuccessfully not getting a job and having to put his tail between his legs and run back to Ann Arbor. This is a big year for him, I think. If they can get it done, and have a bounce back year and have anything close to what they did last year, I think it'll be pretty impressive because they did lose a lot, especially those two edge guys. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, last year at this time, we'd be talking them top 5. There was a lot more depth at this position, but there isn't. I mean, there's guys. I mean, I could easily see at the A&M just getting walked because you're banking on younger guys. There's just not the depth at this defense that you once see. So,
yep, no doubt. Well, we'll put the list up for everybody to take a look at, get
absolutely
ready for the drafts and get their defenses going. We've got our guest ready to go, so I'm going to bring him on now so we can dig into the SEC and start talking a little Southeastern Conference football. But yeah, definitely go check out the list. Message us, contact us if you guys have any questions before your draft. James is the guru. He's been breaking it down all preseason about which guys you should take, which defenses you should take. So let us know if you need help getting ready for your draft. But we're going to go out to the guest line. We're going to bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. John Wilkerson right now.
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, John, can you hear us?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
We sure can, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're having a good Sunday morning so far.
Off to a good start. Sounds like you guys have got everything covered in terms of what the fantasy forecast is, and just looking forward to joining you guys. Glad we could make this happen.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I've been hoping to have you on for a long time, and I'm really glad we're going to get to talk to you. And first things first, I want to dig into the bread and butter and get your feelings on, first off, what happened last year with the team right here in Knoxville, the Tennessee Volunteers. What was your overall assessment of Heupel's first year? Hendon Hooker obviously played well. What did you think about last year, and what are your thoughts going into 2022? Do you think they can replicate last year? Do you think they can be better? What are your feelings on last year and coming into this season?
I think they can be better this year. I expect them to be better this year. You might think that because Tennessee was really strong, pretty strong, I should say, in the second half of the season, that it was just, that was kind of what the feel was from the get-go. But, I mean, there was a different starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. There were so many unknowns. Tennessee coming off of a 3-win season where they won the first 2 games in 2020 and then lost 7 in a row and then won the last one before we all said goodbye to Jeremy Pruitt and his staff. But Josh Heupel came in, and what was most impressive to me, Nate, was the fact that he made such a connection with the players that he inherited. I mean, you heard about them doing so much stuff that didn't have anything to do with football early on because he just wanted to get to know the guys. And, as they say, before you can coach, you got to prove you care. And I think that's what he and his staff did. And then to hear the guys talk about the players, about how motivated they were to make 2021 all about getting the bad taste of 2020 out of their mouths for them as well as the fan base. I just thought you heard a very similar message from a lot of really good team leaders, a lot of the senior class. Matthew Butler is kind of at the head of that list for me, but you also had other guys that did a fantastic job as well. So then, you kind of have kind of stops and starts. Milton proved not to be the most consistent guy, got banged up a little bit, and then here comes Hendon Hooker. That's when Tennessee, I think, hit a stride and showed exactly what this offense can do with Josh Heupel calling the plays and just having that high-powered attack. The most impressive performances for me were just those first quarter knockout punches against Missouri and South Carolina. But then you get to the end of the season and you had the chance to finish with a strong, put a bow on it with a Music City Bowl win over Purdue. That didn't happen because you couldn't stop the Boilermakers. So unfortunately, it ended with a loss. But the fact that you have a veteran quarterback in place, his favorite target coming back in Cedric Tillman, coming off a 1,000-yard performance. And I think you're set in a number of areas that are just going to help. Sure, you need to build the receiving core and find out who you can trust along with Tillman, but I think you've got wonderful options. And then the defense has to do a better job turning over the opponent, but job one will be getting off the field when you have a chance to on third down. To me, that's the key. Anytime you get the team off the field on third down and any turnover you create, that gives your offense another chance to put points on the board. And so I think Tennessee has the chance to take a step forward. And we've also seen expectations change. I mean, there were so many question marks. You're looking at Tennessee as a 5th or 6th place finish in the East last year. Now it's a 2nd or 3rd place by the media poll, SEC Football Media Days. It was Tennessee picked third, just behind Kentucky. So there are greater expectations, but I also think Tennessee as a team can rise to those expectations and simply be better across the board.
You've seen a number of coaches during your time period in the city. What's different about Heupel from those new coaches going in from year one to year two? Is it culture? Is it connection? Is it the community? Like, how has he been different overall as a coach?
Well, I just think there's a lot of genuine spirit that surrounds not only Josh Heupel, but also his entire staff. And you look at him adding some veteran pieces, because he brought essentially his offensive staff from Central Florida up here. Then you go to the defensive side, and you have some familiar faces to Tennessee in the SEC, as you have Coach Garner Rodney Garner on the defensive line. You've got Willie Martinez in the secondary. You go to the Big Ten for your defensive coordinator. So I just think that you brought in some veteran guys. But I think Josh Heupel has been so completely comfortable in his skin, because there were a lot of people that weren't huge fans of the hire, because it's like, oh, great, here's Danny White hiring the guy that he hired at Central Florida. That's all it was a one-to-one promotion. And I don't think there's any question that we can look back now, see what Danny White has done and is doing across the board in terms of his expectations for success at the University of Tennessee. And he knows how important this hire was. And I think from the day he became the head football coach for the Volunteers, Josh Heupel has been so comfortable in his approach. I think he knows exactly what he wants to see. And, I mean, we've seen coaches in the past that just wanted to make their connection to the fan base was putting together what was a highly rated recruiting class. Didn't matter whether or not those players fit the scheme. That was so ridiculous. You get 4- and 5-star guys. They only help you, one, if you coach them up, two, if they fit what you want to do on offense and defense. And so what you had were a handful and far too many square pegs trying to go into round holes. And I think that this is a staff that has now shown that they can compete when it comes to recruiting. They've shown that they can develop players. And I go back to how very basic their approach was in connecting to the players that were going to wear the orange and white last year. And to hear some of the guys that went through last year and are now getting ready for year two, whether it be offense or defense, so comfortable with what they want to do, so comfortable with what they feel they can do.
Yeah. No, that's excellent stuff, John. And you're right. I mean, he did get it done. I mean, there was a lot of question marks, myself included, whether the offense would work in the SEC. But it did work. I mean, I go back to what you mentioned, that South Carolina game. I was in the house that day. I mean, they were firing on all cylinders. It was like they couldn't be stopped in that first half. I think they scored on every possession, and it was pretty amazing to watch. But, you know, there are some questions going into 2022. I mean, the offensive line, to me, is somewhat of a question mark. Our boy from Knoxville Catholic, Cade Mays, has moved on. The running back position is a little bit unsettled. And then the wide receivers, you know, with Tillman being the best guy coming back. And then they've got, you know, Hyatt and then some younger guys. What are your feelings about the offense for 2022? You think they could be better? And do you think the offensive line can make some holes? And what about the running game? Are they going to be able to run the ball this season?
I think they will be able to run the football. I like the offensive line, even though you do lose a couple of performers. As you mentioned, Cade Mays. It looks to me that another Catholic product, Cooper Mays, could be the key, because it was obvious last year that he has such value in calling out the signals, making sure everybody's lined up the way they should be. And unfortunately, Cooper just couldn't stay healthy. Tried as much, worked so hard to get back on the field. He'd get out there for a few snaps and then wind up having to go back to the sideline. It was really unfortunate, but I think he's very optimistic, and I don't think there's any question that he has lived up to what Cade said about his younger brother and his ability to do. So I think if Cooper Mays is healthy at center and can help kind of anchor that middle of the line and just make sure that everybody knows what page they're on, I think there is the chance for this to be a very solid offensive line, if not above average in the SEC. You've got a lot of guys that have time under their belt, and I'm really excited to see what Darnell Wright does. You saw him start to come into his own last year. And this is somebody who arrived as a not only big recruit, but in some outposts, he was the top-rated recruit in the country. And I don't think there's any question he hasn't lived up to that billing. But I'll say this, He didn't hit the door. He's worked hard to make sure that what they want from him, that he can give them. And I think he's worked hard to make sure, just like the other offensive linemen that'll be that front five this year, they've worked hard to make sure they're ready for the physical challenge of running this offense with the high speed and all the snaps.
What about Brew McCoy? I mean, he was so ballyhooed being at, the former USC product, and just hasn't been able to live up to the expectations. Do you believe that a new environment in Knoxville, plus with that high up-tempo offense, could really kind of bolster not only his ability, but his confidence as a whole too as well?
I do think so. Now, he does have another hurdle or two to clear to get back on the field. I think there's some academic work that has to be done, but I don't think the fact that Josh Heupel is talking about him tells me that it looks to be in line for him to be able to get this done. Excuse me. But I do think that he's somebody who, without a doubt, can be a big-time addition to the offense. But I also think that it's not going to be at the expense of the guys that have been in the system for a little bit. And so I do think that he has a chance to be a playmaker. And I do think that he has the opportunity to show what he can do. But I also think that he's got to work and prove that he can be out there and do it exactly what they want him to do in the offense. But I do think when all is said and done, there will be a trustworthy group of receivers that Tennessee can work with. Can you hold on a quick second and just go grab a bottle of water real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, no, and I as John was saying, I think the Vols, offense is going to be fine. Coach Heupel proved last year that he can call plays in the SEC, that he can get it done. The offense was electric. They finally, it took them a little bit of time to figure out who the quarterback was going to be, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I think they did that pretty quickly. And Hooker proved to be
31-3 with Hooker. I mean, come on, you can't ask for much more than that. I mean,
yeah. I mean, this is a guy that didn't really tear things up at Virginia Tech.
Absolutely.
But he certainly came in here and did a hell of a job. And I'll give him his credit. Once he got on the field, it was like, here, we've got our guy. And once they've solidified that position, the rest is history. But as John mentioned, the biggest problem in my mind is the defense. Can they get the guys off the field? Can they stop the other team? That was the Ole Miss game, for example, was the big one to me. If they could have just gotten a couple of stops, they could have easily won that game. And the guys that stand out to me are, first and foremost, another Knoxville Catholic product. And I'm not just talking about these guys because I went there and I love the Irish. Hell, they've got a lot of great players out there right now. And one of them is Tyler Barron, who I think had a tremendous season last year and I think is poised to break out this year. And the guy opposite him, I think Young, also is a pretty nice edge player. So, John, talk to us a little bit about what you expect from Barron this year and also Tennessee's defense.
Yeah, I'll start first with Young, who right now has been the only first-team selection in regards to preseason teams for the SEC from the University of Tennessee. So I think Young is somebody who is obviously going to give you punch off the edge. But I also agree with you 100%, Nathan, in the sense, or Nate, that, excuse me again, that Tyler Barron has the chance to be a difference maker. We saw that at Catholic, and I think that he's shown flashes that he can do this. But it comes down to consistency. And so for that reason, excuse me again, can't shake it. I think that he has the wherewithal to go out there and not just make a difference, but be a big-time performer with what he can do, because as teams adjust and deal with Young on one side, you got Barron on the other, as well as better play at linebacker, and you've got a problem if you're the opposing offense.
Now, you've seen a lot of Tennessee football throughout your career. What would be like your personal highlight, both the good and the bad, that you've seen during your time, either a game, a play, something that happened that both got you excited and were kind of like, oh crap, here we go again?
Wow. Well, at the low end of the totem pole, it would have to be the Georgia State game.
Oh gosh.
It was such a nightmare And you just kept waiting for somebody to step up and say, not on my watch. And unfortunately, it never happened. There's still no excuse. I mean, Georgia State has the win they can point to forever.
Yeah.
I mean, you had trucks driving around Atlanta for the rest of the season that we're talking about. Hey, remember, we beat Tennessee. So that was just beyond gruesome. And then as far as the highest highs, it would be back-to-back SEC championship game victories in 97 and 98. The national championship in 98 being in Arizona when Tennessee won. That's the stuff that literally dreams are made of. And to just to see the guys get to revel in that and what it meant to the program and the fan base, and of course that being John Ward's final season, I just think you couldn't have asked for better.
Yeah, no, everything kind of fell. Everything went perfectly that year, and that's what you need, to have a storybook season, is for everything to kind of happen and fall into place. And you got to have some things, the ball has to bounce your way. And especially when you play in this league of the SEC, I mean, there's not going to be any weeks off. I mean, Georgia, even though, as we talked about when we were breaking down their defense earlier, they lost 8 of 11 starters, but hell, they rotated guys in last year who were just as good in some instances. So I think Georgia's going to be just fine. They've got most of their offense coming back, at least quarterback-wise. They lost a few running backs and 2 of their good wide receivers, but they've got Brock Bowers, who's one of the best tight ends I've ever seen as a freshman in the country. And, we'll see what happens. But Georgia's definitely the perennial favorite in the East that we've seen. John, just talk to us a little bit about the East, first of all. What do you think as far as the other teams? Georgia, we know, is going to be tough. What about Kentucky? What about Florida and their new coach and their new staff coming in? Who scares you? Who do you think might be a good challenge for Tennessee when they're facing the SEC East foes?
Well, Kentucky was picked second in the Eastern Division, just ahead of Tennessee. 4 first-place votes to the Volunteers, 1. So Kentucky, Mark Stoops, give him all the credit in the world. He's won 10 games twice in the last 3 years. So, but I do think Tennessee, who won head-to-head last year, again, sorry about the frog in my throat. But I think Tennessee was able to get the stop it needed, and that game is in Knoxville. So I really think that the path is there for Tennessee to finish second in the division. I agree with you. It starts with Georgia, ends with the reigning national champs. And then after that, I would go Florida by a nose ahead of South Carolina for 4th place in the division, and that's how the SEC media went with it. Even though there was so much turnover on the roster and then the staff as Billy Napier takes over, I mean, Florida still has, I think, better talent than South Carolina. Now, granted, Gamecocks had so much momentum as they finished last year. Then they hit the portal and hit it hard and got some really good talent for Shane Beamer in Columbia, starting with Spencer Rattler, who left Oklahoma to become the quarterback in Columbia. So I think they're going to be a tough out. Tennessee goes there just as it goes to Athens. And I think that's going to be a battle. But I think Tennessee has shown that it can exploit the defense that the Gamecocks have. And so it should be a good matchup. But I just like Tennessee as the number 2 team in the division. I would put Florida 4th. I would put South Carolina 5th. And then Missouri comes in at 6th because, as we saw last year, Tigers really couldn't stop anybody.
Yeah.
And you just don't get the feeling that that's been addressed to enough of a point that Eli Drinkwitz and the Tigers can climb the ladder. I expect them to be around a 500 team. And then while Clark Lee says that Vanderbilt has started the journey to becoming the very best team in the country, not just the SEC, but the country, he did get 1 first-place vote and 1 championship vote in the SEC. And we'll see whether or not the conference lets that person vote again.
Was Clark Lee's mom somehow voting too as well? That's why I saw that. I thought it was like a joke. I thought the Onion posted that or something. I was like, I saw that. I couldn't believe it.
Something tells me that Clark Lee's mom is a little more realistic. So anyhow, that's how I would stack it, and that would be Georgia 1st, Tennessee 2nd, Kentucky 3rd, then Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, and Vanderbilt.
I got to say, I agree with that 100%, and that's exactly what I put as mine a few weeks back. We talked about this with Nate. So I'm on board with you, John, 100%. I mean, I look at Kentucky too as well, and I think losing the receiver, the Nebraska transfer, Wan'Dale Robinson,
Yep.
I think that is really going to hurt Kentucky as a whole, because I don't think Tavion Robinson is Wan'Dale Robinson, and that was just a huge hole to lose. But I agree with you on Mark Stoops, but I just don't think they have enough guns to beat Tennessee, especially in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be good again, and all credit to Stoops because he's been connected to more and more job openings year after year, and he's said and been so loyal to Kentucky that he stays there. They win games, and they go to the postseason, which is pretty much as you could dream that Kentucky would be in position to do. They've challenged for a spot, maybe in the SEC championship game, but with Georgia being head and shoulders above everybody else in the division, I still think that's out of reach for this time, for the time being.
Yeah. Watching Mark Stoops is honestly like watching Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. I mean, granted, Stoops went to Iowa. I mean, they recruit the same way, they play the same way, they just wear different uniforms. That's it.
Yeah, no, he's done a great job there, and I've been very impressed with him. And the fact that he stayed there, to me, gives him even more credit, because he could have bailed and tried to jump to another ship, and he stayed pat and stayed there trying to make the Cats into a perennial SEC good team, and he's done it. So I give him a lot of credit for that. But talking about someone who's done it year in and year out, and this is something we talked about a little bit earlier, John, and wanted to get your take on, and that's Nick Saban. I mean, this week was just another showing that the St. Nick is going nowhere. I mean, he pulled in 3 of the top players in the country in 1 week. They got several of the best players in the portal, and Ricks, the cornerback, and then they got a receiver, Burton from Georgia. I mean, it seems like he's using every avenue to keep this train rolling. And John, I just know you've covered football for so long. You've watched so much football. What are your thoughts on what he has done there in Alabama? I mean, what is your thoughts about the dynasty that he's created? Have you ever seen anything like it? And do you think we'll ever see anything like it again?
I'll be surprised if we see anybody approach it. I think that Kirby Smart has Georgia as close to what we've seen at Alabama with what he's done since taking over in Athens. And I think he's going to be able to have the Bulldogs in the hunt for quite some time. Excuse me. And so, but with what Saban's done, I mean, first of all, the standard, the fact that year in, year out, they're in the mix. You have to start with Alabama. That's where the conversation starts, not just for the SEC, but for college football. And you look at how many different assistant coaches that he's had in now 15 years in Tuscaloosa. And to me, that's as impressive, because we've all seen wholesale changes where, for whatever reason, whether it's guys becoming head coaches or getting a chance to be coordinators, things like that, new staff doesn't click. And that can be the end for a team before the season ever gets going. But that hasn't been the problem at Alabama. And because he just goes out, gets guys that come in. We know that Saban is hard to play for. We know that Saban is hard to work for. But everybody does it, and they do it as hard as they can. And usually the results are going to be very, very good. Now, granted, it's you never want to be facing Alabama when they're coming off a year they didn't win the national championship. So I don't think there's any question. Everybody in Tuscaloosa is going to be fired up to follow up on coming up just short last year and get that crown back, that crystal football where they feel it, well, the trophy where they feel it where they feel it belongs. But for him to be having done this now 15 years in Tuscaloosa, I don't know how soon it's going to be that he thinks about stepping aside, because it's obvious this is what he loves. This is what fuels him, and this is what gives him the reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah, I would have no problem with him taking off. I'm ready for him to step aside. I mean, I think about it all the time. How many championships could my Buckeyes have possibly won if that guy wasn't, down in Alabama? I mean, there's been several times where we've lost head to head with them, or, they've just been a better team. James, what do you think?
Well, I'm wondering if he was that good of a coach, why doesn't he go to a place like UConn or UMass? Let's see how good he really is then. No, he's a phenomenal coach. I agree. John, what are your thoughts if, let's say, Nick Saban does decide to retire at the end of the year? Who is their heir apparent? I mean, we've heard names galore from Dabo, which I don't buy for a second, or Kirby Smart. Who would be that logical fit to come in after the fact and take over the reins from Nick Saban?
Well, that's $1 million question, James. Simply for the fact that you point to Dabo, and while he is an Alabama guy, he's built what he's built at Clemson. And of course, they have to do some proving this year after the step back. I mean, and it was supposedly such a horrible season, but there they were. I mean, they almost made it back to the ACC title game. That's even with all their struggles. But obviously, they have to get back to where they've been in ruling the roost in the ACC. And then you have Kirby Smart, also from that Nick Saban coaching tree. I don't think he's leaving his alma mater. I mean, he's where he wants to be and where he's doing such a great job. Jimbo Fisher isn't leaving Texas A&M, another Saban assistant. So I don't have the first idea. I don't think it's going to be Lane Kiffin.
No.
So I don't have the first idea as to who it would be. Steve Sarkisian got to rehab his image and reform as a coach with Saban's help in Tuscaloosa. He's now at Texas. So you look at how many tentacles from the Saban tree roots reach out to so many programs. But I think it would be really interesting to see exactly who wanted the job and who the Crimson Tide wind up with when indeed it's time for change at Alabama.
Well, I mean, you look at the coaches that were at Alabama after Paul Bear Bryant. I mean, quite frankly, you were never going to live up to the standard no matter how good you were. And being
Ray
the guy
Perkins.
after Ray Perkins, exactly. I mean, heck, he went to the Giants after Alabama. I mean, it's so hard to be the guy after the guy. I think the only person that can realistically say did it was Jimbo after Bobby left. But I mean, Florida State went down a little bit too as well. It's such a tough job to go up against after the fact. But I mean, hopefully we'll see it sooner than later. Is there somebody on Alabama's schedule you could see beating? I mean, that could potentially beat them?
Well, I do think that there are those days that you don't play well. I mean, you go back to last year, and Auburn, which just fell off the table in the second half, should have beaten the Crimson Tide. But then you go back to their quarterback, Bryce Young, just willing them to win. He would not let them lose. It was one of the most impressive performances because it hasn't worked the entire night. Then when you have to have points, they go get points.
Yeah.
So there isn't any game that I would pick Alabama to lose on their schedule, but that's the way it is going into any year. But we know Texas A&M beat them, and they were able to do it, even though they jumped out to a big lead, took advantage of a ton of mistakes, rallied. Alabama did to take the lead, and then A&M, to their credit, came right back and was able to finish off what was a huge win. Obviously, they didn't do anything with it because you lose to Mississippi State and you finish with 4 losses. That's not the year that you want to point to and say, yep, we did it that year. You did beat Alabama, sure. It's Jimbo's first win against him. So I don't think there's any question. That could really be a fight with what Texas A&M has. But I also think the fact that they beat them last year, that it's going to be in Tuscaloosa this year, I think that could be one heck of a fight. But I also think that's the game that the Crimson Tide has circled. But look how close Florida was early on to beating Alabama. And if they do a better job of play calling at the goal line, maybe they do. And maybe Dan Mullen's still the coach.
Yeah. Gosh, what a nightmare that was. I mean, they were ranked in the top 15 going into that game, and everything was roses. And then all of a sudden, they fall apart at the end, lose that game, and Dan Mullen's career just took a nosedive after that. It was kind of crazy to watch, but we'll see what happens, John. It's not too much further away. I mean, we got a couple of weeks, and as James mentioned, Nevada's kicking off against Jerry Keel and New Mexico State or New
Aggies.
Mexico?
Yeah, New Mexico State Aggies. Yeah,
we can't wait for that one. So we're getting ready, and we appreciate you coming on today, and we're looking forward to college football getting going, and and we really appreciate you taking the time to come in and give us your thoughts on the SEC.
By the way,
Sorry,
John,
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, James.
I just wanted to let you know, since you do baseball too as well, I actually live in the same town that Drew Gilbert grew up in. So I've been following his career when he and Will Frisch were just slinging it for baseball. They had a heck of a team growing up. So
that's right. They won a state title with the Ponies, and
You
now
got it.
he's a signed first-round pick of the Houston Astros.
Yeah.
And boy, love the fact that what I think is going to be able to do for them. I think he has a chance he would be the fourth Tennessee ball to play for the Houston Astros if he makes it to the Major League club. Phil Garner being the first, Chris Burke another one, and then Matt Duffy was another. But I just think that they got a great one, and what just the clutch gene is alive and well.
Yeah.
And Drew Gilbert, he's worked so hard, and I can't wait to see what's next for him, along with the other 9 Tennessee baseball players that were drafted and all signed. So it's just incredible to see the talent that is now wearing the orange and white on the diamond.
Yeah, they had a tremendous year, and it was fun to watch, and it was fun to listen to you all year, John, because you did a hell of a job bringing the Vols into our living room, man. We really enjoyed it, and we appreciate your take today, and really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on the Vols. Hopefully they'll pull it together and knock off the Bulldogs and win the East, because I'd love to see nothing more.
Well, that's one of the things. Another of the great moments that really stand out that you asked about earlier, James, the Hail Mary to win at Georgia.
Yeah.
Is still one of the greatest plays for Josh Dobbs, again, finding a way. When you look at the guys that were involved, no surprise as to who the 2 troublemakers were for the Bulldogs against the Bulldogs that day. Josh Dobbs, Jawan Jennings, just finding a way to make a play. That, to me, if you look for one moment in the last 10 years, that's probably, to me, the shining one, because that was one so unexpected after you had the little bit of collapse that allowed Georgia to go into the lead, but you get one snap and make the most of it. Oh, goodness. Great to see if we see something close to that this year.
Yeah.
I got to imagine, like, calling like that kind of play, you kind of lose your perspective of being work versus fan, because when something that amazing happens, it's kind of hard not to get excited and just jump up out of the seat. It's just got to be. Do you ever forget? Do you ever like stop thinking like, oh, I'm on the air. I'm actually working right now, watching a football game. I mean, does that ever happen at all or not?
Oh, I can say this, going back all the way to 95 when Tennessee was Mike Keith was calling Tennessee baseball. The voice of the Titans was, and I was doing color. And Tennessee had started the NCAA tournament experience. Todd Helton's freshman year is 93, but they didn't make it to the regional final. They hosted the next year, made it to the regional final, lost to Arizona State. There they were in 95, back-to-back SEC championships. And I was just losing it in the first matchup against Oklahoma State, who was thought to be the favorite in the regional that year coming out of Knoxville. And, I mean, I'm just beside myself with every call. And I just realized afterwards, like, you need to step back, mister, because what's going to happen is going to happen. And all you do is make yourself upset. So I was able to pump the brakes just a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, going with the guy that you brought up, Drew Gilbert, his grand slam to walk it off against Wright State last year in the regional opener in Knoxville. At that point, you just really can't believe what you heard or what you saw. And so for that to be the case, it's there have been so many moments like that, because you go from you had 7 walk-off wins last year for Tennessee baseball, and then this year you have 9 losses the entire season.
Wow.
And I think they were only positioned to save 13 of the games they played. That's how dominant this team was. You win the East by 10 games. You win the conference by 6. It was really just unbelievable, the steamroller that they were. Unfortunately, they didn't make it back to Omaha. But, it's always fun when you get to those moments, because what you see in that stuff happening, that kind of magic, that lightning strike, that's what the guys are working for.
Yeah.
And so when you see it pay off, the effort, the energy, the blood, sweat, and tears they poured into it, you can't help but appreciate it. But it really is tough, because the one thing that I'm most happy about, I didn't curse. It's that holy bleep moment. It's like like Jack Buck said famously, I can't believe what I just saw. And for that grand slam against Wright State by Drew Gilbert, or the walk-off home run to even the series against top-ranked Arkansas last year by Max Ferguson, those are moments that are just so enjoyable. But again, the guys that are doing it you couldn't be happier for them, because you know how hard they've worked just to put themselves in that position.
Yeah.
No, it was an unbelievable year, and hopefully we'll see some of that same magic hit the football field, because they showed that they can get it done in year one under Heupel, and I think hopefully year two will be just as exciting and maybe a little more so if they can win a couple of those games that they should have won last year, especially I think back to that Ole Miss game. I mean, that the mustard being thrown and all, that I can understand why the Vol fans were a little bit upset. That was it. There was mustard. Actually, Lane Kiffin still has the golf ball that hit him in the chest. Apparently, he kept that one. So, it was a memory. That's one I will never forget. Is sitting there watching that melee unfold, and then seeing a yellow golf ball hit Lane Kiffin in the chest, and I was like, "Who the hell brought a golf ball to the football game?" I mean,
straight from the range.
Did you play earlier in the day and you still had that in your pocket, or
they hit
what?
A bucket, forgot about it, had it in their pocket, just got mad. I'm telling you.
I mean, sometimes I leave the tees in there, but I usually am able to clear the balls out of my pocket. So it'll be fun to see. But we'll be listening, John, as always, and we certainly appreciate you taking your time on a Sunday to come and talk to us and break it down for us.
Yeah, anytime, Nate. James, enjoyed meeting you. Hope you guys really appreciate the invitation and be glad to do it again.
Thank you so much.
All right, John, thank you so much. We appreciate you. You're a legend. We love you. And we'll talk to you real soon, buddy.
All right, take care.
All right, see you, man. All right, that was Mr. John Wilkerson, the voice of the Vols, as I call him, and a great guy. And, man, how could you break it down any better than that? I feel like I know what's going to happen in the SEC East now, don't you, James?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Not only that, it's just, you never think about it when you listen to that voice on the radio. Like, they're into it just as much as you are. Like, it's personal. It was just like, I've always wanted to ask that question, because some of them are just so locked in. And I'm like, it's football. It's supposed to be fun. It's a game. So
yeah, I equate, almost my entire life, I've heard John Wilkerson's voice, when I've listened to ball sports. And so I almost equate the sport itself to that guy's voice, and the two kind of are intertwined in my mind. So it's kind of cool to get him on the show today and get his perspective, because he certainly has a lot of knowledge and has seen a lot of football in his day. So we got it broken down, man. The SEC is ready and willing for you. So if anybody missed any of the show, go back and rewind and check it out. Go to YouTube and check out our channel, and make sure you get all the latest content. But James, thank you so much for your efforts today. I appreciate you. Hopefully the SEC and college football will be as fun this year as it was last year. And hopefully anybody, once again, besides Alabama, can win the title.
Hey, 4 weeks left of talking season, then we get playing season.
I like playing season a lot better. I love talking all year. I mean, there's really no off season anymore. There's
no.
You got the the national championship goes off, and then bam, you're right into the combine. You're into pro days. You're into recruiting, and it never really stops. So that is the good thing about our sport that we love, college football, is that it's pretty much year round now. But the fall is something like no other. So I'm looking forward to it. We've only got a couple weeks left to go.
But I still want to put my hand out to Clark Lee's mom and getting him that first place vote in the SEC and winning the SEC championship. We're really appreciate your vote.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that is not going to happen. If Vanderbilt wins a game, I'll be in a game in the SEC, I will be shocked. I mean, I'm sorry. They were 2-10 last year. They were 0-8 in the conference, and they weren't really even close in any of the conference games. So I don't expect Clark Lee to be winning the East in year 2. So I don't know where the hell that came from, but
if he wins the odds right now, if he wins the SEC are, did I see 75,000? Like, is that no way? Yes, 75,000 plus 75,000 to win the national championship plus 300,000.
Yeah, and that might be generous.
That may be generous, yes.
I think that is generous. But, hopefully you can get it turned around. I mean, Vanderbilt's had some decent years. We talk about Coach Franklin. I mean, he went down there and won, and that's one guy that you can never take that away from him. He went to Vanderbilt, coached there, and won games in the SEC, and that's why he, is going to make $100 million coaching at Penn State, because he proved he can win anywhere. And by anywhere, I mean anywhere, by winning SEC games at Vanderbilt. So pretty impressive.
Perfect.
All right, guys, have a great day and enjoy yourself. And we'll be back next week to talk to you about a little bit more college football. James, thanks for your efforts and keep your chin up. Adios, my man.
Later on.